My dead brother called me 3 months after I buried him, and after saying my name, he warned me. Don't trust what they told you about my death. I heard every word clearly. It was a Tuesday night in March, just before midnight, and I was alone in the rented house I still live in on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I was 32 then, old enough to know that grief can distort memory, interrupt sleep, and make an ordinary sound feel like a message. I also knew my brother's voice. Michael had called me almost every Sunday for years, usually to talk about nothing important. A bad movie. A new coffee shop. Our mother's latest attempt to convince us that 30 minutes outside Portland counted as living in the wilderness. His voice had a quiet warmth to it, and a slight roughness whenever he was tired. No recording could have reproduced the way he said my name that night. The neighborhood had gone still. The refrigerator hummed behind me, rain tapped against the kitchen window, and the porch light flickered whenever the wind moved through the trees. At 11:42 p.m., my phone began to ring on the counter. I nearly ignored it. Then I saw the caller ID. Michael Mitchell. For several seconds, I could only stare. Michael had been dead for 3 months. I had watched his casket descend into the ground beneath a gray Oregon sky while our mother held my hand so tightly that my fingers went numb. The police said he had died in a single-vehicle crash on Highway 26. It happened on a dry afternoon, on a straight stretch of road, with no traffic obstruction, no mechanical failure, and no alcohol or drugs in his system. Michael was 29. He had perfect vision, a clean driving record, and no medical condition that could explain why his car left the pavement and struck a stand of trees. The report listed the cause as undetermined. At the time, that word had seemed like a place to put all the questions we were too exhausted to ask. Standing in my kitchen 3 months later, I told myself the call had to be a technical error. His number had been reassigned. Someone was spoofing it. A carrier database had restored an old name. Any explanation was better than the one my body had already accepted. I answered. For a few seconds, there was only a thin wash of static, like a radio searching for a station. Then Michael said, "Sarah." He sounded far away, but he sounded alive. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. He took a breath. I heard that too. Then he said, "Don't trust what they told you about my death." The words were followed by a long burst of static. I called his name again and again. The line stayed open, but he did not answer. I slid down against the cabinets and sat on the kitchen floor, listening until the call ended on its own. The screen showed a duration of 2 minutes and 11 seconds. That number meant nothing to me until the next morning, when I opened the accident report for the first time since the funeral and saw the recorded time of death, 2:11 p.m. I spent the rest of that day inventing explanations. A cruel prank. A delayed voicemail routed through his number. A stress response so vivid that my mind had filled in details that were never there. But the call remained in my log, and when I contacted my carrier, the representative could confirm only that an incoming call had reached my phone at 11:42. She could not identify the originating network. She suggested caller ID spoofing. I wanted to accept that. I almost did. Then, 4 nights later, Michael called again. I was washing a plate when the phone rang. The name on the screen stopped me so abruptly that the dish slipped from my hands and struck the bottom of the sink. It did not break, but the sound seemed to crack through the whole house. I dried my hands on my jeans and answered before fear could stop me. The static was softer this time. Michael said my name, then spoke 5 words. "Ask what they took, Sarah." I leaned against the counter. "Who took what?" I asked. "Michael, what are you talking about?" His answer came in fragments beneath the hiss. "From the car. They searched it." Then the connection vanished. I checked the duration. 43 seconds. No meaningful number, no obvious pattern, just another impossible call. The next morning, I read every page of the crash summary. Our family had received. It listed Michael's wallet, keys, clothing, and cell phone. Nothing else. I remembered that he often carried a black laptop bag, especially during the months before he left his job, but the summary did not mention one. Michael had worked for Ashcombe Risk Solutions, a corporate risk and compliance firm headquartered in downtown Portland. The company did security reviews, regulatory audits, and risk assessments for construction, transportation, and infrastructure clients. He resigned 8 weeks before his death and never gave us a clear reason. Whenever I asked, he said the work had become complicated and changed the subject. I called the Oregon State Police non-emergency line and requested the complete collision file. The records clerk explained that the family packet was only a summary and that supplemental property and evidence records required a formal public records request. When I asked whether anything had been removed from the car, she paused before saying she could not discuss material that was not in the packet. The pause may have meant nothing. At the time, it felt like confirmation. I filed the request that afternoon. Then I called my mother. I did not tell her about Michael's calls. She was only beginning to sleep through the night again, and I could not bring myself to place an impossible voice inside her grief. Instead, I asked whether Michael had seemed frightened before the accident. She was quiet for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she said he had phoned her about a week before he died. He told her that people from Ashcombe had been contacting former coworkers and asking where he was living, whether he had been traveling, and whether he still had any company property. My mother assumed it was an employment dispute. Michael told her it was not about equipment, but he refused to explain. He also said he sometimes saw the same dark SUV near his apartment and outside the grocery store. She had urged him to call the police. He told her he had no proof and did not want to sound paranoid. "I should have pushed him," she whispered. I told her it was not her fault, but after we hung up, I sat in the dark with my phone in my hand and wondered how many warnings all of us had mistaken for stress. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael called 3 more times. The calls never arrived on consecutive nights and never lasted more than a minute. In the first, he repeated a name. "Daniel Reyes?" In the second, he said, "Storage unit. Behind the winter coats." In the third, his voice was so faint I almost missed the final words. "Rachel has the rest." I wrote everything in a notebook beside my bed. Exact times. Call lengths. Every word. I did it because the messages were becoming a path, and because I was afraid daylight would make me doubt what I knew I had heard. I told Emily Carter before I followed the next clue. Emily had been Michael's closest friend since college, and she was one of the few people who had stayed in regular contact with him during his last months. I invited her to my house on a Saturday afternoon. We sat at the kitchen table with a pot of coffee between us, and I told her about every call. I expected concern, disbelief, or the careful expression people use when they think grief has become dangerous. Instead, Emily went pale. She asked me to repeat the name Daniel Reyes. When I did, she said Daniel had worked with Michael at Ashcombe. They were both assigned to a compliance review for a major infrastructure account, though Michael never told her the client's name. According to Emily, he believed inspection findings were being changed before they reached the client and state regulators. At first, he thought the alterations were clerical. Then he realized failed tests and safety exceptions were being removed from final reports. Daniel noticed it too. Both men raised concerns internally. Daniel died before either of them could take the matter outside the company. Emily had not known the details of his death, only that Michael became frightened afterward and resigned soon after. She also told me something Michael had said during their last dinner together. "If anything happens to me, don't let Ashcombe take whatever is in my car." He laughed after saying it, as if he wanted the sentence to sound like a joke. But Emily remembered that he kept looking through the restaurant window at a dark SUV parked across the street. We searched Daniel Reyes's name together. After nearly an hour, we found a short article in a local newspaper. Daniel, 34, had died 4 months before Michael in a one-car crash on Oregon Route 6. It was early afternoon. The road was dry. No other vehicle was identified. Toxicology was negative, and the cause of the crash remained undetermined. The similarities were not proof of anything, but they were too precise to ignore. The article included the reporter's newsroom contact information. I called on Monday and reached him after leaving 2 messages. He remembered Daniel's sister because she had insisted her brother was being followed before his death. She believed someone had entered his apartment and searched it without taking electronics, cash, or jewelry. The reporter had been unable to confirm the break-in, so it never appeared in the article. He gave me no private information, but he told me Daniel's family had repeatedly asked investigators to look at Ashcombe. That night, I drove past the company's headquarters without planning to. The building was a 12-story block of reflective glass near the river, polished and anonymous. Most of the offices were dark. 1 floor remained lit. I parked across the street for less than a minute before a security guard stepped outside and looked directly at my car. I left immediately. It was a foolish impulse, and it taught me nothing, but the sight of that building made the danger feel less abstract. Whatever Michael and Daniel had discovered was not buried in a haunted house or hidden in an old family secret. It existed behind keycards, non-disclosure agreements, legal departments, and windows that reflected the city while revealing nothing inside. The complete records file arrived on a Wednesday, 15 days after my request. A thick envelope from the state police was waiting in my mailbox when I came home from work. I opened it on the porch. Most of the pages contained diagrams, photographs, measurements, and language I had already seen. Near the back, I found a property supplement. It listed a black laptop bag and an encrypted external drive. Recovered from Michael's trunk. Both items carried Ashcombe inventory labels. According to the release form, a company representative had provided matching serial numbers and documentation identifying them as corporate property. The items were released to Ashcombe's legal department 3 weeks after the crash. The procedure itself may have been lawful. What disturbed me was that Michael had resigned 2 months before he died, had kept the equipment, and had specifically warned Emily not to let the company retrieve it. The report also noted that the driver's compartment and trunk had been searched after the vehicle was towed, but it did not say who first notified Ashcombe about the equipment. I called the records clerk again. She said the property claim came through an attorney and that the release had been approved because the serial numbers matched. She could not tell me who provided the attorney with the inventory information. I then called the towing company listed in the file. The manager checked an archived log and told me a man representing the vehicle owner's former employer had appeared the day after the crash, before the police evidence hold was lifted. He had not been allowed to enter the secured yard. The manager remembered him because he returned twice and asked whether any loose papers had been found in the trunk. That detail was not evidence of a crime, but it gave weight to Michael's warning. The following Saturday, I went to his storage unit across town. Our parents had visited once after the funeral, but they had taken only family photographs and a few personal items. Everything else remained where Michael had left it. The unit smelled of cardboard, dust, and cold concrete. There were boxes of books, a small desk, camping gear, 2 lamps, and a row of winter coats hanging from a portable rack. Michael's second call had been exact. Behind the coats, pushed into the rear corner, was a taped shoebox. Inside were printed emails, audit tables, handwritten notes, and portions of technical reports. Most of the language was beyond me, but certain details repeated: Project or 47, load-bearing tolerances, failed bolt tension tests, incomplete corrosion. Imaging, and a client account labeled Northwest Meridian Infrastructure. Several pages appeared in pairs. One version showed failed inspection results. The corresponding version showed the same sections marked as passed. On top of the papers was a note in Michael's handwriting. Rachel Reyes has the originals. Do not contact Ashcombe. Make copies. Tell Laura Bennett. Beneath the note was a small flash drive wrapped in aluminum foil. I did not connect it to my computer. Instead, I photographed the arrangement, placed everything in a clean envelope, and drove straight to Emily's apartment. We made 2 paper copies at a 24-hour print shop, stored the original shoebox in Emily's locked safe, and put one copy in a sealed envelope with my attorney's name on it. Those precautions did not make us invulnerable, but they were more sensible than confronting a company we did not understand. The next step was finding Rachel. A search of public obituaries and county property records led me to Rachel Reyes, Daniel's younger sister, who lived about 40 minutes west of Portland. I found a public telephone number associated with her small bookkeeping business and left a message that mentioned only Michael's name, Daniel's name, and Ashcombe. She returned the call within 20 minutes. Before I could explain, she asked, "Did your brother leave you papers too?" We met the following Tuesday at her house in a quiet subdivision. Rachel looked exhausted in a way I recognized immediately. Grief had not made either of us dramatic. It had made us careful. We sat at her kitchen table for nearly 3 hours. I told her about the calls, though I expected that part to be the hardest for her to accept. She listened without interrupting. When I repeated Michael's message that Rachel had the rest, she covered her mouth and began to cry. Then she told me Daniel's phone had called her twice after his death. Both calls contained only static and a sound like someone trying to breathe through a bad connection. She had never told anyone because she feared they would use it to dismiss every legitimate concern she raised about the crash. 2 dead brothers. 2 sisters. 2 sets of calls, no carrier could explain. That was the moment the story stopped feeling like something that had chosen only me. Rachel brought a fireproof document box from her bedroom closet. Daniel had given it to her 2 weeks before he died and made her promise not to open it unless he failed to contact her for 3 days. Inside were original inspection summaries, photographs, internal routing sheets, and a handwritten timeline. His records matched Michael's copies. Northwest Meridian Infrastructure had hired Ashcombe to conduct an independent safety review on a highway bridge retrofit west of the city. The project was already months behind schedule. Failed load tests would have required replacement work, a new inspection cycle, and substantial contractual penalties. According to Daniel's notes, senior staff at Ashcombe altered the findings so the work could be certified on time. Daniel documented the changes. Michael later discovered that the altered data had been forwarded to a state oversight office under his employee credentials while he was away from work. That made him both a witness and a potential scapegoat. He began saving duplicate records. The 2 men planned to meet with an attorney and an investigative reporter. Daniel died first. Michael resigned, kept gathering evidence, and tried to find out whether Daniel's crash had been investigated as anything more than an accident. Rachel also had a copy of an email Michael sent Daniel 3 days before Daniel died. It read, "If either of us gets scared and backs out, the other still sends the package to Laura." Laura Bennett was a local investigative journalist known for reporting on workplace deaths, construction failures, and regulatory misconduct. Michael's note had not merely suggested a reporter. It had named the person he and Daniel had already chosen. Rachel and I did not contact Laura from either of our home networks. We met Emily at a public library, created digital copies on a new encrypted drive, and sent Laura a short message asking for a secure way to provide documents. She replied the same day with instructions for an in-person meeting. She also advised us not to contact Ashcombe, not to post allegations online, and not to surrender originals to anyone without a written receipt. Her caution was reassuring. She did not promise that the documents proved murder. She did not tell us what we wanted to hear. She said they appeared to show serious misconduct and a possible motive for intimidation, but every claim would need independent verification. Laura met us the following Thursday in a small rented office above a bookstore downtown. She spent 2 hours reviewing the papers and another hour asking questions. She wanted to know where each document came from, who had handled it, whether we had altered file names, and whether either brother had described direct threats. Rachel showed her Daniel's timeline. I played recordings I had made of the static from Michael's later calls. His words were too faint to survive the recording clearly, but the call logs were visible, including the first duration of 2 minutes and 11 seconds. Laura did not try to explain them. She simply wrote down the dates. Before we left, she said the documents were significant enough to investigate, but she warned us that the investigation might lead to a corporate cover-up without proving that anyone caused the crashes. That distinction mattered. I had spent weeks moving from grief to suspicion, and suspicion can become its own kind of trap. Laura's discipline kept us anchored to what we could demonstrate. Over the next several weeks, she cross-referenced project codes with public filings, bridge inspection schedules, contract amendments, and state correspondence. She located 2 former Ashcombe employees who agreed to speak anonymously. One confirmed that staff had been pressured to remove failed findings from the Northwest Meridian reports. Another said Daniel had accused a senior manager of manipulating data and that Michael had copied audit logs showing who made the changes. Laura also found that an Ashcombe attorney had contacted the state police within hours of each crash to ask about company property. That still did not prove involvement in the deaths, but it established a pattern that demanded scrutiny. During that period, my phone remained silent. At first, I felt relieved. Then I began waking at 11:42 and checking the screen before I was fully conscious. I had become accustomed to fear arriving as a name in white letters. Without it, the house felt too quiet. One evening, I came home and found the porch light unscrewed just enough to stop working. It could have been vibration, weather, or an old socket. A dark SUV idled at the corner for several minutes before driving away. It could have belonged to anyone. I documented both details and told Laura, but I refused to turn every coincidence into evidence. Emily stayed with me for several nights, and I changed the locks. Those were reasonable precautions. We did not chase the vehicle, confront strangers, or break into Ashcombe's offices. The truth was already in the records. Our job was to keep it safe long enough for someone with authority to examine it. In late October, Laura called and said her editors had approved the investigation for publication pending final legal review. She had verified the altered reports and obtained confirmation that state inspectors had opened a separate inquiry into the bridge certification. She still could not connect Ashcombe directly to either crash. No witness had seen another vehicle. No mechanical sabotage had been documented. But both cases would be examined again once the evidence became public. That night, for the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe Michael's trail had reached its end. The final call came on a Sunday evening while I was sitting on the porch watching the light disappear behind the Douglas firs. My phone rang at 6:17. Michael's name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. There was almost no static. His voice sounded close enough that I turned toward the front door, expecting him to step through it. "You found it," he said. My throat tightened. "We found it," I answered. "Daniel left half." "You left half." He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "That's why they couldn't bury it." I asked the question I had carried since the first call. "What happened to you?" A faint hiss passed over the line. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I saw the same headlights 3 times. The last time, they didn't pass. I closed my eyes. The official crash reconstruction had found no second vehicle, and his words did not tell me whether he had been forced off the road, frightened into swerving, or simply followed until panic took control. They gave me no name, no license plate, no proof a court could use. They gave me only the shape of his last fear. "Who was driving?" I asked. The static rose. "I never saw." That answer hurt more than certainty would have. It was incomplete because death had not made Michael all-knowing. He could tell me what he experienced, not solve every mystery for the living. I asked whether he was at peace. He gave a soft laugh, the same tired sound he used to make when I asked a question he thought was too big. "Peace isn't knowing everything," he said. "It's knowing the truth has somewhere to go." Then he thanked me. He told me to take care of our mother. He told me he was proud of me. I said his name, and for a few seconds neither of us spoke. I could hear a low sound behind him, almost like wind moving through tall grass. Then he said, "You can stop listening now." The line faded slowly until there was nothing left. The call duration was 2 minutes and 11 seconds. 2 months later, Laura's investigation was published. It detailed how failed safety findings connected to the Northwest Meridian Bridge project had allegedly been altered before submission. It also showed that internal records had been routed through Michael's credentials, and that Daniel and Michael had raised concerns before dying in similar unexplained crashes. Ashcombe denied any involvement in their deaths and said the reporting discrepancies were the actions of lower-level employees. Several senior staff members were placed on administrative leave. State regulators suspended the disputed bridge certification pending a new inspection. The Oregon State Police reopened both crash files to review whether evidence of stalking, intimidation, or a second vehicle had been overlooked. Reopening a case is not the same as solving it. There were interviews, subpoenas, legal motions, and months of silence. Accountability moved slowly, and some questions remained unanswered. Rachel and I stayed close through all of it. Our mothers met once and sat together without speaking for almost an hour. They did not need to explain what connected them. Laura kept investigating. Emily kept copies of everything. I kept the notebook on my nightstand. I no longer believed every unexplained sound was Michael, and I no longer needed it to be. The calls had done what they came to do. They led me from a closed report to a missing property record, from Daniel to Rachel, from two halves of the same evidence to someone capable of bringing it into the light. I still cannot prove where Michael's voice came from. I cannot explain why the carrier found no originating network. I cannot explain why the first and last calls both lasted exactly 2 minutes and 11 seconds, matching the time of death printed in the report. And I cannot explain why Rachel's phone rang with Daniel's number after Daniel was buried. I can only tell you what happened. And I can tell you one final thing. On the first anniversary of Michael's death, at exactly 2:11 in the afternoon, my phone did not ring. It simply lit up on the table. There was no caller ID and no incoming call screen, only the old call log open to his name. For 1 second, the entry changed. Beneath Michael Mitchell, where the word mobile used to appear, the screen displayed a single sentence. Now let them explain. Then the phone went dark, and when I unlocked it, the message was gone.